This is one of those stories where you have to redefine what winning means. I'm not gonna lie to you. The facts of this story are bad, really bad. What happened to the black man I'm gonna tell you about, I would not wish on my worst enemy. But this story is black history. And as you've heard me say many times before, I believe that all parts of black history must be told. Not just the parts where we marched and sang spirituals. This story is about more than one man because this one man's story was the beginning of a decades-long battle to end racial segregation in America. This is the story of Pink Franklin. Pink Franklin was a 22-year-old black farm worker who was arrested for refusing to work for a white farmer, and then he was sentenced to death. But before I tell you about what happened to Pink, I have to give you some history first, because this history is crucial to really understand how all of this started. I encourage each of you to watch this video to the end. I promise you, you will learn a lot. And I've seen some of the comments that say that I don't tell stories that have happy endings. I'm not gonna say that this story has a happy ending because there are really no happy parts to this story, but there was light at the end of this unjust tunnel that Pink found himself in. So watch this video and find out what happened. After the Civil War, the US abolished slavery, but the South found new ways to keep black people in forced labor. Laws known as black codes criminalized minor infractions like vagrancy, allowing for the arrest and forced labor of black people. Peonage was a system where black people were trapped in a cycle of debt, working to pay off money they supposedly owed to their white employers. This system was supported by a network of restricted contract laws that made it nearly impossible for black workers to leave their white employers without facing legal repercussions. Peonage effectively re-enslaved many black people under the guise of debt repayment. Employers would advance crop seed and materials and small sums of money and even housing and require the black worker to repay it through labor. These debts were often manipulated and inflated, ensuring that black labor remained bound indefinitely. This system was perpetuated by local sheriffs and judges who colluded with white landowners and business interests. This new form of involuntary servitude ensured that the legacy of slavery lingered on long after it was legally abolished. This is the landscape that Pink Franklin found himself in 1906. In the fall of 1906, 22-year-old Pink Franklin and his 21-year-old wife Patsy moved from their hometown to Jake Thomas's farm. Pink and Patsy agreed to work on Thomas's cotton farm. During that time, cotton was king in the South. In South Carolina, it was the #1 crop being produced in the early 1900s. Just like during slavery times, the cotton farmers lived well and the black laborers suffered. Whites owned the farms and black people worked the farms. Black farm workers would sign contracts each year with the white plantation owner. In exchange, black workers were given a little bit of seed and small amount of cash and a shack to live in while they farmed the land. At the end of each year, the black farmer will almost always owe the white plantation owner money. This was how the South kept black people in new forms of bondage after emancipation. The system moved from slavery to sharecropping. Jake Thomas was willing to advance Pink money, supplies, and a place to live, but he required that Pink sign a labor contract first. Having no other option, Pink signed the peonage contract and was hired to plant and harvest cotton on Thomas's farm. In May of 1907, the Franklins had completed their work, but Pink was not happy working for the Thomases. Pink and his wife decided to move back to Willow Township, where Pink's mother was from. They were going to work for another white farmer named Charles Spires. Spires came to move the Franklins, but he was confronted by Jake Thomas. Thomas refused to let Spires move Franklin's belongings. Pink and his wife were forced to sleep on a pallet when they arrived at the Spires plantation. Spires had said that when Thomas asked him where he was taking Pink, Thomas told Spires to hold Pink for him for 2 months until Thomas was ready for him to come back and pick cotton again. Things did not get better on the Spires plantation for Pink and Patsy. Spires required that Pink pick 300 pounds of cotton a day, and Jake Thomas was not done with Pink yet either. He was still angry about Pink and Patsy leaving. At the time, South Carolina law said that if a farm worker failed to work, the farmer could have them arrested and fined and jailed up to 30 days. This kind of injustice was common for black people back then because it was the black people who were needed to farm the land there. In fact, on the day that Pink left Thomas's farm, another black man had been arrested for violating his contract. On May 25, 1907, 5 days after Pink left Thomas's farm, Thomas went to a local magistrate named Joseph Valentine and had a warrant issued for Pink's arrest. The warrant charged that Pink had violated the state's peonage law. Thomas had the judge hold the warrant for 2 months until his cotton was ready to be picked by Pink. On July 29, 1907, Constable Henry Valentine, the brother of the magistrate, and a man named W.M. Carter were given the arrest warrant to serve on Pink and arrest him. Before I continue, I have to tell you a very interesting twist to this story. 3 days after Pink left Thomas's farm, federal judge William H. Brawley, he ordered the release of 2 black men, Elijah and Enoch Drayton, who were jailed for refusing to work under a labor contract. Judge Brawley said that South Carolina's criminal peonage statute, it violated the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, and it also violated the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed black people equal protection under the law. At the time, this was a big decision because it meant that black labor was in jeopardy. Despite the Drayton decision, Judge Valentine issued the warrant to arrest Pink anyway. He didn't care. Constable Valentine and Carter arrived at Pink's house. They broke into his home without knocking or announcing their presence. Pink and Patsy awoke to find Valentine standing in their bedroom. Pink said that Valentine told him to put his hands up in the air, and when he did this, Valentine fired at him. Both Pink and Patsy were struck. Pink grabbed his weapon and fired back to defend them, striking Valentine. Valentine died from his injuries. Pink was terrified after this, so he ran. He thought that he'd be lynched, and frankly, he had good reason to fear this. Just 1 month earlier, a black man named George Hudson was lynched by a mob of hundreds, just 45 miles from Pink's home. Pink was chased by hundreds of white men after this. They didn't catch Pink, but the mob did beat other black people who had nothing to do with this incident as punishment for what Pink had done. They also threw a black minister named Nelson Rice into the river. Pink had stopped at Nelson's home, and Nelson gave Pink something to eat. They asked Nelson if he could swim, and when he said that he couldn't, they picked him up and then they took him to the river and threw him into the water. They even tried to lynch Spires because they believed that he had tried to help Pink get away. Patsy was arrested and charged with taking the constable's life. 10 other black people were also charged with being accessories after the fact to this incident, including a black woman who had a baby in her arms at the time. Pink was helped by relatives and by strangers to avoid capture. He eventually made his way to Denmark, South Carolina, where he was convinced by former Senator Stanix Mayfield to surrender. Before Pink was arrested, Mayfield had a reporter interview Pink so that his story could be told. Mayfield also asked Governor Martin F. Ansel to guarantee Pink's safety. Pink was taken to the state prison for protection rather than returning back to Orangeburg by the sheriff. Mayfield also helped Pink to get a lawyer. Pink was represented by black lawyer Jacob A. Moorer. He was a prominent civil rights lawyer from South Carolina, known for his efforts to challenge the state's Jim Crow laws, and he was also known for helping to restore voting rights to black citizens. Black attorney John Adams also joined Pink's legal team. Attorney Adams was a lawyer and also a minister. He had graduated from Lincoln University and Yale Divinity School. When he took on representation of Pink, he was serving as a professor at Allen University. Pink went to trial in September of 1907. Attorneys Moore and Adams challenged the fact that black people were excluded from the jury pools. They also argued that the charges should be dismissed because the peonage statute was unconstitutional, as Judge Brawley had already decided. All of these motions were denied by 39-year-old Judge J.C. Clue. All black people were excluded from that jury. At trial, the state's case was that Magistrate Valentine gave his brother Constable Henry Valentine the warrant to serve on Pink. When the constable and the other man arrived, they asked Spires to lure Pink out. Spires then went to get Pink, but Pink put him off. That's when the constable and his helper knocked on Pink's door. They said that Pink fired at them first. Other witnesses said that Pink and Patsy attacked Valentine. They also said that Patsy attacked the constable with an axe as he lay bleeding on the floor. Pink was the only witness in his defense. Pink said that he heard nothing until Valentine opened his door and pointed a weapon at him, and then started firing. Pink said that he followed Valentine's orders to put his hands in the air, and that's when he was fired at. Pink said that he was only defending himself and his wife. During jury deliberations, the jury had a question. They asked the judge if a constable had a right to enter the house. The judge said that the constable had the right to enter the home and tear it down if he wanted to, and he didn't have to identify himself before entering the house. Does that sound familiar to you? Police officers using no-knock warrants and coming to a black person's home and a black person ends up losing their life? The jury found Patsy not guilty and Pink guilty. Pink was sentenced to be hanged on Friday, October 25, 1907. The next day, attorneys Moore and Adams filed an appeal arguing that the warrant was invalid and Pink had the right to defend himself, and that the jury selection process was racially biased and violated the Constitution. Not surprisingly, the state Supreme Court denied that appeal on all grounds. Pink's case drew national attention from those who opposed peonage and those who supported it. It was seen as a threat to the South's labor system and also as an opportunity to challenge modern-day slavery. The first civil rights group to be interested in helping Pink was the Constitutional League. It had been founded by John E. Milholland, a wealthy New York reformer. The League was eventually integrated into the NAACP, with the Pink-Franklin case playing a pivotal role in that merger. The League hired former U.S. Attorney General Charles Bonaparte to write the legal brief on Pink's behalf. But there was just one problem. The League and Bonaparte did not consult with Pink's black lawyers. Moore and Adams have fundamental differences on how to challenge Pink's conviction. Bonaparte wanted to attack the peonage law, whereas Pink's black lawyers wanted to make a technical challenge about the jury selection process and the state's 1868 Reconstruction statute that disenfranchised black jurors. Just a few years before, a black lawyer named Wilford H. Smith had argued a case of Carter v. Texas before the U.S. Supreme Court, where the court had suggested that all white juries could be challenged. Smith was the first black lawyer to win a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Attorneys Moore and Adams wanted to push the court to find out if the exclusion of black people from Pink's jury violated the Constitution. The Supreme Court denied Pink's appeal by claiming that they could not prove the intent to discriminate during the jury selection process. Attorneys Moore and Adams did not give up the fight, though. They began a campaign to have the governor grant Pink clemency. They also filed a motion for a new trial after presenting evidence that one of the witnesses had recanted his statement. That motion was denied, and Pink was ordered to hang again on December 23, 1910. This is when the NAACP sprung into action. At this time, it was still a young organization that had only been recently founded in 1909. It was known as the National Negro Committee. The NAACP was in the same office building as the Constitutional League and was aware of what they were doing, and the NAACP wanted to help. Boston lawyer Albert Pillsbury wrote to the NAACP Executive Secretary Francis Bloscore and suggested that they help circulate a petition on Pink's behalf. Days later, prominent South Carolina black leader Thomas Miller, he told the NAACP that white South Carolinians would not help Pink if Moore and Adams remained on his case. The next part of this story is not the best, but it's the truth. Over the next few months, there was a huge fight over whether Moore and Adams will remain on Pink's case. Their names and their reputations were called into question. Eventually, the NAACP was able to convince them to withdraw from the case. They were also very successful in circulating a petition. They got President William Howard Taft to write to South Carolina's governor on Pink's behalf. Booker T. Washington and Adam Clayton Powell Sr. and W.E.B. Du Bois all supported Pink Franklin. The press began to support Pink in South Carolina and called for his sentence to be commuted. The trial judge even wrote to the governor and said that if Pink had been white, he would have never have been convicted. On January 5, 1911, Governor Ansel commuted Pink's sentence to life imprisonment, but this did not end Pink's nightmare. He was then sent to the state prison where he was assigned to work in the state's notorious hosiery mill, known for its harsh conditions. He was then sent to the chain gang in 1914. The NAACP kept fighting for Pink, and finally, in January 1919, Governor Richard Manning paroled Pink for good behavior. For a long time, it was not known what happened to Pink after his release. He disappeared and no one ever heard from him again. However, it was later discovered through looking at census records that Pink had changed his name and moved to Barnwell County. According to 1920 and 1930 census records, a man named Mac Rockingham was living with his wife Patsy Rockingham. Mac and his wife were the same age as Pink and Patsy, and their children had the same names as Pink and Patsy's kids. When Mac died in 1949, his death certificate said that his name was Mac Rockingham Franklin, and his wife was Patsy Franklin. Pink Franklin's case started all because he decided to say no to slavery and yes to individual choice. He faced every injustice that a black person could face back then. He faced modern-day slavery. He faced police brutality, peonage, lynchings, convict leasing, the death penalty, mass incarceration, and unjust court proceedings. His case served as a model for how lawyers and the NAACP should go about challenging Jim Crow and segregation. Pink Franklin's story is black history. I want to know your thoughts on this video. Had you ever heard of Pink Franklin, and how did it make you feel learning all that he went through? Drop me a comment down below and let me know what you think.